Good morning. Hope you're having a great week. It is Monday, April 7th, 11:20 a.m. Central Daylight Time, local time here in Amarillo. I'm pretty sure we're on daylight savings time again. I wish they would get rid of that. So we're going to do some load board looking. First of all, we'll look at this is the hot markets. These are the top 10 markets on Landstar's load board. Landstar's load board is probably 80 to 90% spot market load, so it is reflective of the spot market. But it also has contract freight that is private, that's just on this load board. So this is not the spot market, but it's very similar to the spot market. So Chicago's number one with 2,400 loads, and Houston with 2,200, and then East Pennsylvania, which is like the Philadelphia, New York City, and probably also Baltimore, really densely populated area. Number three, it's really close to the same as Houston. And then Atlanta, San Antonio, LA, Charlotte, Dallas, Spartanburg, South Carolina, and then Columbus, Ohio. Um, Los Angeles. So Los Angeles, like 3 years ago, when the freight market was at all-time highs, was number one on this list by a massive margin. It was 500 to 1,000 loads above number two. Then the port workers went off contract, and businesses diverted freight around the West Coast, went through the Panama Canal, and Los Angeles tanked. And now, with the tariffs, which I am fully in support of, Los Angeles is going to tank even further. I've been hearing horror stories coming out of China. China's economy has been really bad for a while. But I heard that when these tariffs went into effect, Chinese businesses just shut down overnight. Massive, massive numbers of businesses that just went out of business overnight. Um, it's going to get really bad over in China, and we're going to see the number of loads on the West Coast drop even more than they are right now. LA is going to plummet. So the West Coast is not a good place to be, even though that's where I am headed. So there are a ton of other things that I would like to talk about on, the freight market and China and all this stuff. But this is a load board video, so we'll get to the load board. Let me pause this while I flip it over to a search. All right, so I'm putting in some search parameters here, and basically I put in Dallas, Texas, 250-mile radius. This is air miles. This is not driving miles. So this is like put a dot in the center of Dallas and then just draw a circle 250 miles around it. And I chose trailer type as van, and there are 6,283 available loads. All right, we need to put in some more search filters to narrow this down. Destination, I'm not actually looking for a load. Whenever I'm looking for a load, I do sort destinations. I don't want to see anything in the Northeast. The Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, anything in that area Northeast, I don't want to see that crap. I'm not going up there. You can't pay me enough money to lure me up into that region. But we're not going to do that, since I'm just, maybe some of you love running up in the Northeast. So what else? Let's go down here and let's put minimum revenue of $2. Why is the decimal not working? Why is the decimal not working? Oh, that's minimum revenue. This is rate per mile. Let's do minimum rate per mile, $2.50. So that dropped us down to 1,477 loads. So that can give you an idea of, whenever I'm doing these load board videos and you're only seeing like 10 results, there are actually several thousand results. But it's all just really trash loads that are paying like $1 a mile. Landstar's load board is full of $1 a mile freight. So $2.50 a mile, and let's put minimum revenue of let's do $1,500. Now, that was a big chunk of loads that disappeared, because is $2.50 a mile, is that a good rate? Well, you'll have some people say, yeah, that's a solid rate. Okay, then you would be perfectly fine with hauling a load 10 miles for $2.50 a mile. So $25 to haul a load 10 miles. Is that good? No, that is horrible. So the rate per mile, what is a good rate per mile, varies based on context. You have to know where it's going from, where it's going to, how many days are on the load, what type of load is it, the distance. Like if you're talking about an oversized load going 10 miles, like that thing could pay, $5,000 a mile, and that might not even be a good rate. So, yeah, there is no like magic rate per mile that's good. It depends on the context. It depends on everything. So, let's take the rate per mile up to $3 per mile. We're down to 141 loads. All right, now let's go ahead and take a peek at that. So, number one, okay, so I saw a flatbed here and step deck, and I was like, what? I thought I searched by vans, but it also has van listed, so this can be put on anything. So, El Reno, Oklahoma to Seattle, Washington, max weight hazmat, 348 a mile, $6,500. Humble, Texas to Miami, Florida, 365 a mile, $4,300. Another max weight hazmat load. Fort Worth, Texas to New Albany, Ohio, 340 a mile, $3,600. Electronics. Houston to Fort Pierce, Florida, max weight hazmat, 310 a mile. So what you're seeing here, let me sum this up for people who are not familiar with the freight market. So there are destinations and types of loads that pay premium. The Pacific Northwest, Oregon, and Washington pay a premium on loads. Florida and Colorado pay premium on loads. Basically, anywhere in the freight desert, Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota. Well, I guess it depends on which side of North and South Dakota it is. If it's on the western side, it's in the freight desert. The eastern side, not really freight desert. Um, so I wouldn't say the entire state of North and South Dakotas are uh, freight desert. But anyway, what you're seeing here is hazmat loads pay premiums. Loads going to the Pacific Northwest and Florida pay premiums. Colorado pays premiums. So all of these loads at the top of the list, this appears to be, this is, I don't know what it's sorted by. I think it's sorted by total revenue. That appears to be what it's sorted by. But you'll notice all these loads, there's something wrong with them. This one's going to Washington, it's max weight hazmat. Florida, max weight hazmat. Electronics, not heavy. This is good so far. Going to Ohio. So this load right here, Fort Worth to Ohio, 25,000 pounds of electronics, paying $340 a mile. This is a good load. I'm not sure exactly where New Albany, Ohio is at, but Ohio is a good destination. Fort Worth is a good place to pick up from. Um, Electronics is a good load, and it's not too terribly heavy, around 25,000 pounds. Our max weight we can carry in cargo is about 45,000 pounds. So this is about 20,000 pounds from our max weight. So this is a nice weight. So that is the best load so far. Houston to Florida, max weight hazmat, same load. Texas to Colorado, max weight hazmat. Texas to Colorado, heavy, not max weight, general goods, 321 a mile. It's a bad load. All these are bad loads. Texas to Florida, Texas to Florida. Tulsa, Oklahoma to El Paso, Texas. It's a light hazmat load with 2 extra stops on it. Not a good load. Colorado, Colorado. Texas to Texas, max weight hazmat. That's a decent load. Texas to Texas, same load. Going to Colorado, Texas to Texas. A whole bunch of Texas loads that are max weight hazmats that are going to and from places in Texas. I don't know what this is sorting by because it's not total revenue, because now we're down here. Here's a load for $15,000 going to Alaska. Don't get lured into going to Alaska. Hot Springs, Arkansas to Elkton, Maryland, $396 a mile for $4,500. As long as it's not anywhere close to Baltimore, which Maryland is a pretty small place, anywhere in Maryland is probably going to be close to Baltimore. 30,000 pounds of hazmat. Houston to Florida, max weight hazmat, paying $320 a mile. Florida, Idaho, Houston to Idaho, 20,000 pounds of hazmat. And lots and lots. Here's a Texas to Tennessee, max weight hazmat, $417 a mile. And Texas to Texas, tons and tons of these Texas to Texas loads that are max weight hazmat loads. Loads are going like 500 miles, paying $3 to $350 a mile. Now, another thing that you're seeing on here is you're seeing spot market loads, which normally, I'm just going to finish scrolling through here, and you can pause and look at loads if you want. Most of these loads are not good loads. Not horrible loads, but not really very good. Oh man, this is going to take us a while to get through the whole thing. I'm expecting that there's going to be a ton of freight moving around in Texas because the oil and gas industry, and you're seeing tons and tons of these max weight hazmat loads. And I think that you're going to see a lot of freight moving in Texas because of the oil and gas industry kicking up. I've been hearing from a lot of sources that, well, not a lot of sources. I've heard it from like two or three people, that the oil and gas industry is going to kick off by this summer. But what I normally, let's edit the search here. Another thing that I normally select is direct shipper yes. And that takes us down to 46 loads. What does that mean? Well, that means that you're only seeing contract freight. Spot market loads that Landstar agents take off of the spot market and just repost on Landstar's load board are make-believe Fantasyland loads. It's, stuff from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It doesn't exist. The Landstar agents will just put random numbers on there. You have no idea what that load actually pays. Every single load listing is an advertisement, and these agents that list loads, they're marketing the loads. They're trying to get people to call. They're trying to create sales leads. So you have a lot of scummy agents at Landstar that will lie just to get their load listing up there higher. And that's the reason I typically don't even bother looking at spot market loads, is because the price that they're listed at is much higher than what you're actually going to get. And the loads tend to cancel a lot because it's the lowest bid. You can book the load and you're getting your truck and you take off down the road. 2 hours later, you get a call from the broker, oh, that load canceled. because they found somebody else that would haul it cheaper. That's the kind of crap you deal with on the spot market. You don't deal with that with contract loads. I still deal with drama with contract loads, but it's nowhere near the drama that I deal with whenever I haul spot market loads. I've only hauled a couple of spot market loads, and that was enough to get me to just never haul spot market loads again. I almost never haul spot market loads at Landstar. On my all of my load alerts that I set up, I don't even have load alerts to show me spot market loads. I don't even see the loads. Whenever I'm looking for loads, I filter out spot market loads. So now we're just looking at contract freight. So that El Reno to Seattle is still sitting there. And there are several of these loads that are posted. Max weight hazmat going from El Reno, Oklahoma to Seattle, Washington. And we have the Fort Worth to New Albany, Ohio is still there, and that looks like a good load. That's looking good. Tulsa to El Paso, really light hazmat load with 2 extra stops on it, paying $3.16 a mile. That's not looking that great. El Paso is not known for being a good freight market, but I've been seeing quite a few decent loads coming out of the El Paso area over the last week. It only takes like 1 or 2 agents having decent contracts in an area to make the area good. Fort Worth to Meade, Colorado, $3 a mile. I don't really look at Colorado loads unless they're paying a minimum of $5 a mile. Oklahoma City to Henderson, Colorado. They've dropped the price on this. They can't move these loads. So this is CGI, who has the Saya contract, and they have a whole bunch of these loads posted, and they can't move them from Oklahoma City to Henderson, Colorado. People aren't stupid enough to haul this crap. Number one, it's a team load. Let's go in here and look at the load. So they have 3 of them posted. All of them are posted at $3.62 a mile. I've never seen one of these loads get covered. They have them listed at 616 miles. Now, if you do like the shortest route between Oklahoma City and Henderson, Colorado, which is basically Denver, then yeah, it's about 620 miles. But that's like backroading it on dirt roads. I'm exaggerating. It's not dirt roads, but it's backroading it on, these small roads all the way there. The actual route that you would take in a truck is to take I-35 to 135 to 70 and then take 70 across to Denver. That is 680 miles. All of these loads, you only have 1 drive shift to deliver them. Actually, you know what? Oh no, this one I was like, man, this one has an extra drive shift on it, but that's probably because it picks up on a Friday or something. Down here, this one picks up on the 29th, delivers on the 29th. Picks up on the 24th, delivers on the 24th. This one right here is an abnormality that you have 2 extra days on it. It's probably the weekend. April 26th is Saturday. So it picks up Saturday morning, Friday night basically, and it doesn't deliver until Monday. So that's the reason you have 2 days to deliver this one, is because it's over the weekend. Normally, these are all same day deliveries. And these people that are, these agents that put these loads together, they don't really think about this crap. They just like put in zip codes and it tells them what the mileage is, and that's what they throw on the board, and they're like, 616 miles? Yeah, a solo driver can do that. But in actuality, it's 680 miles, plus you have to factor in the mileage to get to the pickup and the mileage to get to a place to park after you deliver the load. So you throw on 20 miles to get to the pickup, 20 miles to get parking afterward. So that 680 turns into 720 miles. That's nearly impossible for a solo driver to do in a single drive shift, especially when you're picking up and delivering a load in that single drive shift, because you're going to be burning your drive time driving around on the property picking the load up, and you're going to be burning your drive time on the property delivering the load. So you're going to waste probably 30 minutes to an hour of drive time for loading and unloading. The only way that you can do 700 miles in a single drive shift is if you're in the middle of a long run where you're just waking up and just driving. You're not delivering, you're not picking up. So this is impossible for a solo driver to do legally. If you speed and you lie like crazy on your logbook, yes, you might maybe be able to do this as a solo driver. Maybe. You'll be cutting it real close. So that's probably one of the reasons they're having a very difficult time moving this load. The last time they called me and offered me the load, it was paying like $4.14 a mile or $4.50 a mile. I think it was $4.14 a mile. But I was desperate for a trailer, and if I would have been able to pick the load up and deliver it on time, and they would have let me take it without giving them a trailer, I would have taken the load. But I couldn't make the pickup and delivery appointments. They were willing to see about giving me the load without giving them a trailer. But I told them don't bother checking because I can't make the pickup and delivery appointments. But I did the 680 miles is terminal to terminal. I got the actual terminal addresses and looked at the actual mileage, and it's 680 miles from terminal to terminal, taking the interstate, not taking dirt roads. And if you take those dirt roads, yeah, the mileage is shorter. It's only like 620 miles, but it's probably going to take you an hour longer. So you're running. It's not a mileage issue; it's a drive time issue. So you even if you went the shorter mileage route, it's going to take you longer on that route. Yeah, these loads, not that great. And I typically don't even look at short loads. I usually put a minimum of $3,000 whenever I'm looking for loads because I don't like doing short loads. I'm surprised this El Reno, Oklahoma to Seattle, Washington is sitting there. There's two of them. I'm not sure if it's the same load listed twice because one of the things these agents will do is if there's flexibility on the pickup and delivery times, instead of putting a date range on the pickup and delivery, they'll just relist it like 5 or 6 times with like several different pickup and delivery dates. It's really annoying. I've called on loads before where there was like 10 loads listed, and they told me that it's just one load. Landstar was supposed to crack down on all this stuff. Last time I went to an orientation class, whatever at Landstar, their cabs class to get my hazmat renewed, they told me that they started charging agents a percentage fee for every load listing. They charge like 0.5% or 1% or something like that to list a load, to try to get agents from listing the same load over and over and over again. Because agents know that whenever they list a load, that it creates a load alert. So, like, you'll have agents that, like, you could get 40 alerts in a single day off of one agent just listing the same load over and over and over again. They'll take it down and relist it over and over and over again, or they'll refresh it. There's some way that they can refresh it, and it'll create a new load alert. And they know that it does that, and they'll just do that over and over again. I've had agents that I've blocked their entire agency. That I blocked entire agencies on my the phone app, which you can do, because they just kept doing that. Just tons and tons of alerts on the same crap load all day long, and they're lying on the load listing. So it wouldn't even be popping up on my load alerts if they weren't lying on their load listing. but it was crap like if I remember correctly, it was a load that had like a whole bunch of extra stops. Was the last one I remember that they were doing that on. This is an example of how they do this. Like it looked like a good load the way they listed it, but down in the comments it said that it had like 15 extra stops, so it had like an extra 1,000, 1,500 miles on it. So it was paying like $1.50 a mile instead of $3.50 a mile. Just that's the kind of stuff the agents do. Okay, let's look at a different market. Let's look at the terrible LA market. Whenever I search LA, I always search out of Fontana. So 250-mile radius, that's a pretty big radius to search around LA. You're going to probably get Vegas and San Diego, but 15 loads. Didn't change any search parameter. And how many loads did we have in Dallas? Dallas, Texas doesn't even show up in the results. 44 loads in Dallas. Fontana, California, 15 loads. The LA market used to be a premium market. Dallas is a solid market. It's not a great market. It's not a bad market. It's a solid market. There's tons of freight coming out of Dallas, but there's just so many trucks in the Dallas area that I don't think Dallas could ever become a premium market just because of how many trucks there are in the Dallas area. That's for a market to become premium, the number of loads coming out of that area has to far outnumber the number of trucks, and I don't think that's going to be easy to do anywhere in Texas. It's getting hot in here. I'm going to have to open a window. Let me pause this. It's 75 degrees back here. All right, it should cool off pretty quick. I think it's like 45, 50 degrees outside. Let's see what the phone says. 53. 53 degrees outside. All right, looks like the majority of these 15 loads are from one agent. Moreno Valley, California, these are all the Harbor Freight loads. And almost all of the, well, not almost all. One, two, well, no. These are multi-loads, so these two, I don't want to dig into them to see how many there are. Oh, right here it says 3 results, 2 results. So that's 5, 6, 7. 7 of the 15 loads are one agent, the Harbor Freight loads coming out of Moreno Valley. And going to Bozeman, Montana, Helena, Montana, paying $3.80 a mile. That is bad. That is horrible. These are max weight loads going out into the freight desert for $3.80 a mile. You're talking like 1,000-mile deadhead to get to your next load. These are abysmal loads. Inglewood, California to St. George, Utah. I think St. George is basically Vegas. Am I remembering correctly? I think St. George is down in the very southwest corner of Utah. It's like 100 miles past Vegas, something like that. $4.25 a mile. It's not a good load because St. George, Utah is out in the middle of nowhere. I think Vegas is the nearest town, and Vegas is not a great freight market. You're probably going to have to deadhead all the way back to the LA market. So you can just basically cut this rate in half, take it from $4.25 to $2.12 a mile is basically what that load's paying. Because you're probably going to have to deadhead all the way back to LA after delivering that load to get your next load. Gardenia to Sun River, Oregon, $3 a mile. Butte, Montana for $4.29 a mile. Moreno Valley to Maricopa, Arizona. Isn't Maricopa County the county that Phoenix is in? So that's probably the Phoenix area. $4.85 a mile for a max weight load from, it looks like Harbor Freight's just putting $42,000 on everything. and that is what a lot of these contracts will do. Like the contract will say that the max weight that you can put in the trailer is 42,000 pounds, and a lot of these lazy agents will just put 42,000 pounds on every single load because that's the max contract weight. They won't bother to check and see what the actual weight of that load is. And that appears to be what this lazy Harbor Freight agent is doing, is they're just putting 42,000 on every single load. San Diego to Lansing, Michigan for 423 a mile. Oh, wow, that is an amazing load, but it's 2 days. It picks up April 7th at 8 p.m. and delivers April 9th at 10 p.m. That is, I don't think that I sorted this by teams. I didn't select the team option. Just a second. This is the stupid jank. This is the janky crap with this new load board. Whenever you click on anything with this load board, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes, it'll log you out. Sometimes it'll take you back to the main page. Sometimes, you never know what's going to happen. So, let's see. Hazmat, yes. Team, yes. Okay, so this is a team load. So if you're a team, we found a team load. This thing is paying really amazing money, but not so much for a team. Not so amazing for a team because you got to cut this in half for a team. I would say that's probably a solid load for a team. It's not like amazing. 423 a mile. You can get that solo. $9,600 to go from San Diego to Lansing, Michigan. It's been sitting on the load board for 2 hours and 21 minutes. If that was an amazing load, then it would be gone by now. Amazing loads don't sit on the load board for more than about 15 minutes tops. Henderson, Nevada to Mesa, Arizona. This is the Google account, JQL. $484 a mile. Henderson is basically Vegas going to Mesa, Arizona. I don't know if Mesa is Tucson or Phoenix or where in the hell Mesa is at. Short little run, paying $1,500. Not amazing, but not horrible either. Then we have 3 Colton, California loads. One's going to Lakewood, Washington, Hayward, California, Santa Rosa, California. 377, 458, and 444 a mile. They have a whole bunch of extra stops on them. 8 extra stops, 8 extra stops, 5 extra stops. So the extra stops does not include your final. So there's a total of 8 plus 1. So 9 deliveries, and 6 deliveries. And this is the agency, the SUL agency, that posts a ton of loads out of Grants Pass, Oregon. Every time I'm up in the Portland area, I get tons of load alerts from this SUL agent. And they're all these loads that have tons and tons of extra stops on them. I can't remember if this agency has all the crazy requirements about blankets and straps and stuff like that. Okay, 1 pick, 9 drops, driver assist to tail. This is something that is absolutely absurd at Landstar. Now, I've talked about this in the past. If you unload the freight to the rear of the trailer, but you don't go put it away in the warehouse, you're just taking it off the back of the trailer, Landstar considers that a driver assist, and they pay like $50 for that. That does not make sense. If I'm taking the freight to the end of the trailer, I'm not assisting with the unload. I'm unloading the trailer. I don't care what the customer does with the freight once it gets off the trailer, off the back of the trailer. That's the customer's problem. That's not an assist. That's an unload, which Landstar only pays like $150 for a driver unload. So I don't do driver unloads. I don't do any touch freight at Landstar because they don't pay any money for it. And they have this weird idea of what an assist is. A driver assist is like whenever you're delivering paper and the forklift driver is like, hey, whenever I take the paper rolls out, will you pull up the mats off the floor and toss them onto that pallet? Yeah, I'll do that. That's a driver assist. Or let's say that somebody's loading a trailer and they want you to put a sticker on each pallet as they're putting it into the trailer. I've done that before as well. That's a driver assist. If I am unloading the freight to the back of the trailer, that's a driver unload. That's not me assisting with the unload. So, yeah. Please make sure to take pictures of load securement at every drop. Like you have to take pictures everywhere. And also, please take the survey on the link in the body of your email. So this one doesn't have any crazy blanket and strap requirements. It's just a driver unload. You have to do 9 driver unloads. So this SUL agency, I've gotten really, really close to blocking them on my app. And it's not because I think they're a bad agency. It's just that every single one of their loads I've ever seen are these big multi-stop driver unloads. And I am not touching any of these things. And most of this pay is in driver unload pay. They only pay like $50 to unload, but you have 9 driver unloads. So that would be $450. They don't break it down here in the. Let me pause this. I'll open up the old load board. All right, this is what the old load board looks like, and this is one of the things that I've emailed. There's a feedback email that you can send on the new load board, and I've sent 2 or 3 emails about this problem. I'm a business owner, and in order for me to make a business decision, I need to know all the details. And they don't provide the details on the new load board. You see on the old load board here, it breaks down all the accessorial pay. So right there it is, $450 for unloading. So that is $50, and you're doing 9 unloads. Fuel surcharge $568.40. And stop offs. So $200 for stop offs. So that's 8. What are they paying for stop offs? 200 is not divisible evenly by 9. It's not by 8. Is that just some random number that they threw in there for, you're doing a whole bunch of extra stops, so I'm just going to throw $200 in there? Let me just double check. 200 divided by 8. 25. Okay, yeah. So 8 does divide evenly into 200. So it looks like you're getting $25 for each extra stop. So yeah, $650 extra dollars with all of the extra stop pay. And I'm not even sure if you get 100% of that or 65% of that because I don't do multi-stop loads and driver unloads. So I'm not sure what percentage you get of it, if you get 100% or 65%. So yeah, California looks really bad. Now let's look at another market. Let's look coming out of the Seattle, Portland area. The way I do this is I just look at Portland. Why would Oregon? Why isn't is it doing it alpha? It's alphabetical. 250-mile radius around Portland is going to cover Seattle and basically all the way to the California border. So 17 loads. Even the Seattle Portland area has more loads than the LA area. That's how bad the LA market has gotten. All right, Portland to Salt Lake City. Portland to Spokane. What? Portland to Salt Lake City, $3.52 a mile, 2,700 bucks. 4 results. Now, is that 4 different loads, or is it just? Oh, it's the SIA agency, CGI agency. Okay, let me explain something here. We've got this. You can look at all the rest of the loads while I'm explaining this. And here, the ROR agency, the SUL agency, these are the 2 agencies that I get spammed with loads anytime I'm in the Portland area with these big multi-stop loads. This ROR agency is really bad. I've seen loads from this ROR agency with 38 extra stops. Like, it's really common for them to post loads with 30 plus stops on them. So every single one of these loads are the SUL agency. All of these loads down here in the bottom half are the SUL agency, all coming out of Grants Pass, Oregon, going all over the place, paying like $350 a mile. $1,500 to $3,800. Now, these are the full rates. We only get about 70% of this. What the numbers you're seeing on here, we only get about 70% of this. So, if you're sitting there seeing $350 a mile and just dreaming up all the money that you can make off of $350 a mile, $350. Where the hell did my cuckolauder go? 3.5 times 0.7 is $245 a mile. That's decent. That's pretty good. If you're running at $245 a mile gross to the truck all the time, then you're going to be successful. But these are the full rates, what the customer pays. This is not what I actually get paid. I get about 70% of what you see on here. So, CGI. I've been seeing a lot of CGI loads on the board, especially along this Portland, Salt Lake, Denver, Oklahoma City lane. So I've already shown you the loads from the CGI agency, the SIA account. SIA, the LTL company, the red trucks that say SIA, SAIA on them. The CGI agency has a contract with them. So almost all the loads you see with CGI are SIA loads. And I've been seeing a lot of loads coming out of Oklahoma City going to Denver. A lot of loads going from Denver to Salt Lake. And then now I'm seeing a lot of loads going from Portland to Salt Lake. I haven't looked to see what's coming out of Salt Lake, but I suspect you're also going to see a lot of SIA loads coming out of Salt Lake. What does this mean? Well, when an LTL company is able to handle the freight on their own, then they don't outsource to places like Landstar to haul loads for them. Whenever you start seeing a lot of loads, like an LTL company like UPS, FedEx, SIA, XPO, Old Dominion, etc. Whenever you see those LTL companies posting a whole bunch of loads to have, third parties like Landstar or Swift or whoever haul, that's because they are getting more freight than normal. If they don't have more freight than they can handle, then they're not going to need people like Landstar to haul loads for them. They can haul all that capacity within their network. Those companies don't typically hire drivers whenever they start getting excess freight because they pay really well. A lot of them are union jobs. It's not easy for them to increase and then decrease the number of employees that they have. So typically what they do is they have a certain number of employees that handles a certain amount of freight. And if the freight stays within that, within that uh, capacity, then they're not going to move any loads with anybody else. They're going to move all the freight on their own. Once the capacity starts going over what they can handle, then they start hiring carriers to haul the excess for them. So whenever freight markets are booming, you will see LTL carriers moving a lot of freight with third parties. When the freight market tanks, you start seeing LTL carriers moving almost no freight with other carriers. So like on Landstar's loadboard, for example, back when the freight market was at all-time highs, Landstar's loadboard was flooded with Saia loads and FedEx loads. We had tons of. If you wanted to haul a Saia or a FedEx load, you could do it. It was easy. There were so many of them on the load board. And then when the market tanked, you see hardly, well, up until recently, you saw hardly any Saia or FedEx loads on the load board. Now I'm starting to see a lot of Saia loads popping up on the load board. And they're specifically on that lane, that one, well, it's not a lane, but that one particular route. Let's call it a route. So Oklahoma City to Denver to Salt Lake to Portland. That one specific route has a lot of freight. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that freight is booming along that route? Not necessarily. You got to think about that route. That is one of the worst routes to drive in the winter. Maybe not Oklahoma City to Denver. There is quite a bit of weather between Oklahoma City and Denver, but Oklahoma City to Denver is not too bad. Denver to Salt Lake is the worst part of that route. You're going across Wyoming. And then Salt Lake to Portland is a really another bad. That's another bad area to drive through. Lots of winter weather. So when I worked for an LTL carrier 20 years ago, we had massive turnover in the winter. The LTL carrier I worked for, Conway Western Express, which is now XPO, I was based in the Reno, Nevada, the Sparks, Nevada terminal. And the worst route that we had was Reno to Sacramento, which is going across Donner Pass on I-80. And in the winter, it was brutal. We chained up almost every day. And you'd have to chain up going to Sacramento, and then you'd have to chain up to come back over the mountain to come back to Reno. So you're chaining like twice a day. And for truck drivers that have never chained a truck, there's a huge difference between chaining a truck in a training situation, like when it's 70 degrees outside in an open parking lot, and you're just watching somebody that knows how to do it, and you're maybe throwing one chain on a single tire. A lot of places don't even train people on how to chain. But if they do train you on how to chain, you're typically not chaining the whole truck. You're not doing everything yourself. They have so many people in the class that you're lucky to throw one chain over one tire. You're mainly just watching. And you're sitting there, when you're watching somebody do something, it looks a lot easier than when you're actually doing it. These chains are heavy. I think some of the double chains are like 50 pounds. And you're having to like bend over and pull the chain out, extended arm, over the top of the tires in this tiny little space, and it's snowing, it's wet, and it's a pain in the ass. But I chained up so much, I got to the point where I could fully chain the truck in under 15 minutes. If I was taking my time, it would take me 20 to 30 minutes if I was just like casually chaining. But if I was like trying to chain fast, I could do it in about 15 minutes. And that was chaining doubles. As an LTL driver, we hauled double trailers. So it was basically I I don't know. They had different chain requirements. Sometimes they would make you chain all four of your drive tires, and they required a drag chain. Sometimes anyway, they handed you a card and told you what the level of the requirement was, and the card would tell you like how much chaining you had to do. But going across Donner Pass, there was a checkpoint before you would get to the chain area, and they would pull in all the trucks and all the cars, and they would make sure that they had chains, and then they'd hand you a little card and tell you what the chain requirement was, and then let you go. Um, and then the highway patrol would give tickets to people that were just sitting in the chain up areas not chaining. Um, and we had a huge problem with that with LTL drivers. Let me switch over to another market while I'm talking. Portland. Let's go to. You've already Portland and Seattle are within 200. You just saw the Portland Seattle. Let's look at Chicago. 641 available loads. So Indianapolis, Indiana, 250 miles is probably too big of a search radius for Chicago, because with Chicago you're getting within 250 miles. Oh my goodness, Chicago, Milwaukee. Like I can't even count the number of major metropolitan areas that you're getting within 250 air miles of. I mean, obviously you're getting Indianapolis. Um, but yeah, you're getting a lot of areas. So Indianapolis to Fontana, $3 a mile, $6,000. These are some decent looking loads. Salt Lake City is not a very good destination. Colorado is not a good destination. Florida is not a good destination. So California, these two loads are going to the LA area. LA, as you just saw, is not a very good destination. So like every single one of these destinations are not good destinations. Um, there's finally one that's going to a decent destination, Valdosta, Georgia. I don't know how they pronounce it. $3 a mile, 900 miles. Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin to Winchester, Virginia. I've hauled a load to Winchester. It's right off the interstate. Max weight 352 a mile. Marion, Indiana to Fort Gibson, Oklahoma, $3 a mile. Midweight hazmat. Yeah, I'm not seeing any amazing loads, but these are all like decent loads. Well, mostly decent loads. Really, honestly, to get amazing loads, you have to have load alerts set up. You're not going to see amazing loads sitting on the load board. So whenever we're skimming the load board, you're just going to be seeing mediocre crap. Unless we just happen to see something that was just posted. Ooh, round trip. CGI agency, Burr Ridge, Illinois to Burr Ridge, Illinois. It's listed as a 1 day. But CGI used to have dedicated runs. Let's see if this is a dedicated. No comments. It's just a single day going to Omaha, Nebraska. So Burr Ridge to Omaha, back to Burr Ridge. 900 total miles, 342 a mile. But back when the freight market was at all-time highs, these LTL companies were so desperate for people to move their loads that they started offering like dedicated stuff. You could sign up to run out of a terminal. And I never signed up for CGI because I asked them like what they were paying, and they were paying just terrible rates. And on top of that, there was no restrictions on where they could send you. You weren't just running out of a terminal like a normal line haul driver where you were doing out and back to that one terminal. They told me, CGI told me that they could send me anywhere they wanted as long as they got me back to that terminal by the end of the week. So they could have you go to New York City and back to Omaha They could have you just hopping around and end up in New York City and then get you back to Omaha at the end of the week. I was like, no, I'm not I'm not going to let somebody force dispatch me wherever in the hell they want in the country. I want to have some say in what I do. So this does not appear to be one of those dedicated runs. And I haven't seen one of those dedicated runs in a couple of years. I don't know if they even still have them. But what in the hell was I talking about? I forgot what I was talking about. Maybe I'll remember in a minute. I'm gonna have to like whenever I start digressing off somewhere, I'm gonna have to like write down over here what in the world I was talking about before I took off talking about something else. These yeah, I'm not seeing any like really great loads, but there's a lot of like decent loads. Like you can make money. Like you $6.31 a mile, 3 extra stops. It's only 333 miles. That's not that amazing. This one agency has a whole bunch of these multi-stop loads that are paying like $6 a mile. The short runs, short multi-stop, just local delivery stuff. Here is a tow-away van, 25,000 pounds, 9 extra stops, paying $6,500, going from Milwaukee to Milwaukee. Let's see what this is about. Multi-load combo. So this is just a bunch of loads packaged in as one load. So it looks like you're going from Milwaukee to Indianapolis, doing a whole bunch of deliveries in Indianapolis, and then going back to Milwaukee, and then back to Indianapolis, and then back to Milwaukee, then back to Indianapolis. You're just going back and forth from Milwaukee to Indianapolis, and a couple of the loads have a whole bunch of extra stops on them. Yeah, I don't think I want to mess with anything like that. One excluded agent. Is it what agency do I have banned? Oh, the DRB agency. This is the one agent that I have blacklisted. And I've told that story several times. Um, I think it was Lennox air conditioners. I was returning, um, like, they were brand new Lennox air conditioners that were just being returned because of issues. They were, like, dead on arrival, or I don't know. I don't know the reason why this small air conditioning store was returning an entire trailer load of Lennox air conditioners. I don't know why all of them were returned, but yeah, Elaine Carroll, I think is her name, with the DRB agency, just did a bait and switch on me with the load. It's the only agency that I have blacklisted. There are agents that I don't want to do business with, but this is the only agent that I truly have blacklisted. What in the world? See how janky this thing is? Let me pause this while I get back. Well, it deleted all my search parameters when it did that. some of the jankiness about this new load board. You have to be very careful with clicking on anything because it doesn't provide a way to get back to where you were whenever you click on stuff. And sometimes it just will open up weird stuff. So let's take a look at Miami. I keep saying that Florida sucks. It's a place you don't want to go. But let's take a look at it. So this is just all van loads in the Miami, Florida area. 250 miles around Miami, Florida. Every single van load, team, solo. The only restriction I have is Miami, 250 miles, and van. Now, let's put in a minimum rate per mile of $1.50. Almost half the loads disappeared. So almost half the loads are under $1.50 a mile. And this, I only get about 70% of that. So I'm not actually getting $1.50 on the load. I'm getting, 70 plus 35, $1.05. On a load that's listed at $1.50, I'm only getting about $1.05 a mile on that load. Now let's take it up to $2 a mile. That got rid of 100 more loads. And I only make about $1.40 a mile on a $2 a mile load. Now let's take it up to $2.50. $2.50 a mile on the full rate is about the break even of most trucks. That's about $1.75 a mile gross to the truck, which is what most people's break even is. So there's 124 available loads at $2.50 a mile. Now, let's get rid of those loads that are really short distance. You know, those loads that are like 100 miles paying $2.50 a mile, so they're only paying like $250. Those loads aren't worth doing. So let's put it at a minimum of $500. Now, another half the loads are gone. So, with just $2.50 a mile, $500. So, what we're looking at right now are loads that are profitable. You can actually make money on these loads. And let's see what results we have. Now, no, actually, I take that back. These are like break-even loads. Possibly break-even, possibly a little profitable. So we have a hazmat load going 200 miles, paying $800. So let's just skim through here. Yeah, basically all these loads are under $1,000. These are all just really short loads. Here we go. Let's sort this. There's an $8,000 load there. Let's sort this by. So we have one load that's Orlando, Florida to Newark, New Jersey, 25,000 pounds. It has 2 extra stops on it. It's a massive mileage run, 3,162 miles, paying $260 a mile, $8,215.68. It's been on the load board for 4 hours. There must be something wrong with it, because if it was any good, it wouldn't sit on the load board for 4 hours. One thing I'm seeing already is that there's only 3 days to do 3,000 miles, so this has to be a team load. $2.60 a mile is a horrendous rate for a team load. This is running like below cost for a team. So this is not a profitable load for a team. Here's Deltona, Florida to Burnsville, Minnesota, 1,500 miles, paying $279 a mile. That's kind of a crap load, but it's actually a decent load for Florida. It's been sitting on the load board for 6 days. It doesn't pick up until April 21st, and it's listed as lift gate. So this is probably a driver unload that requires a liftgate trailer, which is specialized, and it probably requires a bunch of straps and blankets and stuff. Firm pickup appointment, no touch, so it's not driver unload. Minimum 100 pads and blankets, pads and or blankets, plus 30 plus straps with bars if possible. Walkboard or ramp required. Lift gate preferred. Detention begins after 4 hours at $100 an hour. So this is going to take a long time to unload. and it's listed as a government load. So you either have to have a lift gate or you have to have ramps, and they do prefer a lift gate. But you have to have 100 pads and or blankets and 30 plus straps with bars, if possible. In order for you to carry that much dunnage, that much securement material, you have to have a specialized trailer that has belly storage on it. Like if I were to put 100 blankets and 30 straps wouldn't take up a ton of space. I have a box of 10 straps in one of my cabinets, and it's, I don't know, about that big. So 3 boxes would be 30 straps, but the blankets, 100 like blankets, that would take up like a majority of my space in here if I were to put them in here. So you'd need to have a specialized trailer with belly storage to be able to haul around that much material. This is a very, very, very specialized load. So that is paying absolutely ridiculously cheap money for the requirements of that load. That is a crazy cheap load for the ridiculous requirements that they have for that load. It is a very, 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 very specialized load. And then the team load is also, I mean, that looks decent for a solo driver, but for a team, that is a horrendous rate per mile. And then all the rest of these loads are just really short loads. That's the reason that they're paying over $250 a mile, is because they're really short loads. So, yeah. The one thing that's really weird in Florida is Florida's like the only state I've ever been in where I've gone and, inside the truck stop and, you chit chat with other drivers. And it seems like almost everyone that I encounter in Florida only operates inside the state of Florida. They only drive in Florida. Florida is the only state that I've ever been to where almost every driver I talk to only operates in Florida. Like you're in there talking to them about stuff, and you're like, yeah, blah blah blah, and it always seems to come up in conversation where they're like, oh yeah, I only operate in Florida. It's the only state I've ever been to where I've encountered that, and it was like really common that Florida drivers only operate in the state of Florida, and they're mainly just hauling these short little runs that you see right here. This is basically what they do, is they just haul these short little runs. And I'm not talking about landstar drivers. I've never ran into a landstar driver that just operates in Florida. There might be some out there, but is mainly owner operators that I encountered in Florida where they only operate in Florida. Yeah, these are really bad loads. Remember, we only get about 70% of what you're seeing here. And one thing you'll notice is that almost all of these loads, there are some of these loads that are maybe same day. This one right here, it picks up at 6 p.m. and on the 7th, and it can deliver between the 7th and 8th. Like, basically, it says that you can deliver it as soon as you can get there. So this is like an instant delivery. But a lot of these, they're like 2-day loads. They're not same-day deliveries. So you got to cut this price in half. There's, when I'm looking at a load, I'm looking at what I'm getting per mile, but I'm also looking at what I'm getting per day. And $500 a day gross to the truck is the absolute minimum that I will operate at. Because once you take out all your fuel cost and everything, at $500 a day gross to the truck, you're not really going to be very profitable, if at all. That's like your break even is about $500 a day gross to the truck. So, because just thinking about fuel, like how much fuel would you use in one single day? Let's say you're driving an average of 500 miles in a day. That's kind of a light day, but 500 divided by 6.5, or I did times. Like, what? That's not right. So it's like 77 gallons of fuel. 77 times, I don't know what the average fuel price is right now. Let's say 350. So that's $270 in fuel. So 500 minus 270. So you're immediately, sorry, there's a military base right next to here, and there's just military planes constantly flying right over the top of this truck stop. So immediately on just fuel cost, you're losing like 230 or $270. So you're down to $230 gross to the truck. So let's multiply that out times like 5 days. So that's $1,150. Is that right? $1,150 for the week. And then you have all of your fixed costs coming out. So first of all, a company driver's probably sitting there thinking $1,150 a week. I can make that happen. That's, I can do that. Well, that's just your fuel cost coming out. You still have all your other business expenses. Let's say you have a truck payment of $700 a week. So that $1,150 now turns into $450. And then let's say you have insurance of $300 a week. So that $450 turns into $150. And then you have, your ELD subscription and your bookkeeping services, your tax services, your just tons and tons and tons of expenses just keep going on and on and on. You're probably going to be running negative. You're probably going to be losing money at $500 gross to the truck per day. That'd be, like $2,500 on a 5-day week, $2,500 gross to the truck per week. If you're out there running 500 miles a day at $500 gross to the truck per day, you're probably running in the hole. So yeah, all of these loads, really bad loads. To some people, they may not look that bad, but once you start crunching the numbers on them, they are hideous loads. They're really, really bad loads. And if we put in a minimum of $1,000, which on a $1,000 load, I only make about $700. I get about 70%. So if we go up here and we change the minimum load pay to $1,000, which is about the minimum I would actually do on a load, then there's only going to be 2 loads here. And it's these 2 specialized loads, the team load and then the lift gate load or ramp load with 30 blankets. Everything else will disappear off the load board. So yeah, Florida sucks. I think I'm going to wrap up the video there. Let me see how long this is. This is an hour and 13 minutes. I will switch back over to Dallas real quick. Pretty sure we already looked at Dallas at the beginning of the video. Let's take it up to minimum of $3,000 and a minimum of $280 a mile. Still got quite a few loads. 94 loads. And let's look at age. Baytown is Houston. Houston to Pueblo, $3 a mile. That's a bad load. Houston to Florida, $3 a mile. That's a bad load. These are also hazmat. All these top 5 or 6 or so loads. There's actually a lot of loads here. This one right here, Houston to Fort Pierce, has 6 listings. Humble, Texas to Miami has 9 listings. Baytown to La Crosse, Wisconsin has 2 listings, and then this other Fort Pierce has 2 more listings. So these are a lot of the same loads listed a whole bunch of times. Did I not? Yeah, I did not restrict it to direct shippers. That's the reason I'm seeing all this crap on here. You're seeing like the same load 20 times on the load board. That's a whole bunch of spot market loads reposted. So now we only have 15 loads. So there seems to be a lot of interest in these load board videos. And I suspect what it is there's a lot of people that are looking to move from company driver to owner operator. There's a lot of owner operators looking to switch their leases to another company. There are people that probably have their own authority that are looking to lease to a company like Landstar so they can get access to contract freight. I know that there is this, like, I don't know, there's people that are very defensive of whatever it is that they're doing. So there are people that have their own authority who talk very negatively about owner operators that lease to a company. They try to like say that they're not even owner operators. That's absurd. I've crunched the numbers on it, and I've looked at it, and for me, leasing to Landstar is the best option. And there's a whole bunch of reasons, but the two primary ones would be, number one, insurance. I only pay about $6,000 for insurance. If I got my own authority, my insurance would be, I'm not sure exactly how much it would be. When I checked like 5 years ago, it was $20,000 a year, and it's gone up since then. So it would probably be $30,000 or more per year for my insurance if I got my own authority. But with Landstar, I pay $6,000 a year, which is really cheap for one of these trucks. So insurance, that's one big reason. Another reason is I get access to their trailer, which, I mean, you can have a lot of people that have their own authority don't have their own trailer. They use other people's trailers. Like a lot of people out there with their own authority run with Amazon and use Amazon trailers. And they're basically leased to Amazon, but they're running under their own authority. It's a really shitty situation. But the other big reason that I lease to Landstar is access to contract freight. If I was just running under my own authority, I would just be running the spot market. And I hate running spot market loads. I have access to spot market loads here at Landstar, and I do not like the drama of spot market loads. These brokers are some of the shadiest people, like salesmen. These brokers are salespeople. And if you have ever like interacted with salespeople, they are the scum of the earth. They're professional liars and manipulators. That's what they are. That's what they do for a living, is they lie and they manipulate. That's their job. That's the reason I am not a good salesman. If it's a really good product that sells itself, yeah, I can be a good salesman for that. But a bad product, I'm just too honest of a person. I can't be a salesperson selling a bad product. And most of the products that these brokers are selling are not good products. So, yeah, you deal with a lot of stuff in this industry. Non-payment is a really big one. If you're a company driver and your company is constantly reminding you, don't lose your bill of lading. Make sure you get the bill of lading signed. Make sure that all the information on the bill of lading is correct. Why do they keep telling you that? Because every single person involved in the load can refuse payment if anything is wrong on that bill of lading. If the addresses are not right, if any of the information is not right, if it's not signed, if you don't have the bill of lading, there could be 3 or 4 brokers involved in that load. And all of them get paid, and then the very last one decides they're not going to pay your company because of a technicality on the paperwork. But they still get paid for that load, but they refuse to pay you. I mean, that's the kind of shady stuff that happens in the industry. And being leased to Landstar gives me protection against that. As long as I do everything I'm supposed to do, I get paid for the load. I've actually had a load that paid over $5,000 to me. The actual load paid over $7,000, $7 or $8,000 for the load. And a broker refused to pay because the the pickup and delivery addresses were reversed. That was the technicality that the broker refused to pay over $7,000 for the load. That's the kind of shady crap that you have to deal with in this industry. And like they knew for a fact that that load happened. That was a load destined for Mexico. There was a tremendous paper trail with that load, and they refused to pay for that load over that one little technicality on one piece of the paperwork. There was a ton of paperwork involved on that load, but I still got paid for the load. The agent did try to charge back on me, and I saw a negative $5,000 thing on my settlement, and I contacted the agent and asked them what the hell was going on, and they were like, oh, it was a duplicate load. The customer refused to pay. And I said, no, it wasn't a duplicate load. I actually delivered that load. And they're like, okay, we'll get back to you. And they just ghosted me. And I ended up contacting Landstar Corporate and getting a manager at Landstar Corporate. I'm pretty sure I made a video about this. If you want all the details, go find that video. I'm sure it has something about charged back a load on me in the title. Something about being charged back in the title. But after going around and around in circles with the agent and Landstar Corporate, I finally just broke down to Landstar Corporate the terms of the contract. I said, per the contract, I should not even know that a customer refused payment. That's between you or the agent and the customer. I shouldn't be involved in that. My contract states that I get paid for the load regardless of whether the customer pays for the load or not. Customer non-payment is not something I have to deal with. So for them to charge back this load on me for customer non-payment, that should have never happened. So what needs to happen right now is that money needs to be put back on my settlement. I need to get that money back immediately, and then you guys can figure out this non-payment issue. I shouldn't even be involved in this conversation. I shouldn't even know that there was a non-payment issue. And the manager at Landstar Corporate was like, let me talk with the agent. And the manager called me back like 5 minutes later, and she said the agent is going to put that is putting that money on your account right now. And I said, okay, and she said, that's it. And I said, you don't need anything else from me? And she said, no. We're just going to put the money back on your account, and the agent can deal with the non-payment issue. Exactly what I told him should happen. And that was the last I heard of it. They did tell me, the manager did tell me that it didn't look like the agent was going to be able to get the money from that broker because of the technicality on the paperwork with the addresses being reversed. So it looks like the broker did get away with stealing $7,000 something from that Landstar agent over that technicality on the paperwork. But I still got paid, and that's one of the reasons that I choose to lease to Landstar rather than get my own authority. But yeah, there appears to be a lot of people, let me scroll down a little bit, that are either looking to move around in the industry or looking to get into the industry right now. Because getting a lot more views than normal on these loadboard videos. And the freight market still sucks. It's really bad right now. Companies are much more selective than normal. So if you're trying to get into the industry or you're trying to move around in the industry, there's basically like 3 different periods within the freight market. The freight market is cyclical. So you have times when the freight market's doing really well, then you have normal times, and then you have times when the freight market's doing really bad. And how the freight market is doing determines how selective companies are. So if the freight market is amazing, then those are the times whenever you hear about people that straight out of truck driving school are getting line haul jobs with FedEx and UPS and Saia with no experience. They're getting these jobs making $100,000 a year as a line haul driver. And they're getting these amazing routes and stuff like that. That's when you hear about that crazy nonsense. It's really easy to get a job when the freight market is booming. Every company is just trying to get as much of the pie as they possibly can before it runs out. So they're just hiring like crazy. Then you have normal times. And that's when, they start reviewing applications and they're taking the best candidates. And those really good jobs have really good candidates. So it's really hard to get into those places. And then you have bad times like what we're in right now, where it is really hard to get into the industry. About the only place that you can get a job are these really crappy companies like CR England and CRST and places like that. Uh, you might be able to get a job at Walmart if you can find a terminal somewhere that needs people. You might be able to get an LTL job, but you're going to have to meet a long list of requirements. I saw a post by somebody like 6 months, a year ago, that was complaining that he had 6 months of experience, and from what he read, what everybody was saying was that once you get 6 months experience in the trucking industry, you can get a line haul job and work local. So he quit his over the road job and put in a whole bunch of applications to get a line haul job, and no one would hire him with 6 months of experience. And everybody in the truckers subreddit was telling him he was an idiot to think he was going to get a line haul job with only 6 months of experience. And that is absurd. And I came in there and I replied to him and I said, the reason you can't get a line haul job right now with 6 months of experience is because the freight market is bad. If you would have been in this exact same situation 2 years ago when the freight market was at all-time highs, you would have no problem at all getting a line haul job with 6 months experience right now. And that's the reason he thought that he was going to be able to get a line haul job with 6 months of experience, was because whenever he was researching getting into the industry, it was easy to get a job in line haul with 6 months of experience. And then he finally went through the whole process, got his 6 months of experience, and then we were in a bad freight market, and he stupidly quit his job before he had another job. You should never quit your trucking job before you have another trucking job. Don't do that. Always have another job lined up before you quit your job in trucking. 2 weeks notice is not normal in trucking. I would not give anyone 2 weeks notice in trucking, unless it was like some really, really amazing job like UPS. UPS, I would probably try to give them 2 weeks. One of those nice union jobs like that. Well, wait, is UPS union? I keep getting UPS is union, FedEx is not union. Yeah, that's the way it is. So yeah, one of those really nice jobs like that, I might try to give them 2 week notice. But I can't think of any over the road company that I would give 2 week notice. You try to give an over the road company 2 week notice, they're probably going to shut you down on the spot. I know last time I heard of people giving 2 week notice on over the road companies, it's just like company policy that if anyone gives you notice that they're going to quit, you treat them as quitting on the spot and you just immediately shut them down. Like if you I've heard of people that were like out away from their house, like 1,500 miles away from home, and they call and give a 2 week notice over the phone, and they shut them down right there and make them take a bus back home. And, I've heard of crazy stuff like that. So be careful about trying to give 2 week notice at over the road companies. I wouldn't do it. But yeah, it seems like a lot of people are trying to get into the industry right now, or they're trying to move in the industry right now from company to owner operator or change lease or something. So we'll see. I'm hoping. I'm very hopeful. Let's look at another region while I keep talking. Dallas. We've looked at Dallas, LA, Chicago, Miami. Let's look at Atlanta. This is probably where you're going to have to deadhead if you take a load to Florida. You're probably going to have to drive up to Atlanta. 7 loads showing up. Boston, New York. Here's a load to Florida, Pennsylvania, Colorado. These are all bad destinations. Really bad destinations. I wouldn't take a single one of these loads. All these loads are not very good. It's going to New York, New York. Not just New York State, it's going to New York City. Let's see if there's any weird comments on this one. 10 straps, weight tickets, warehouse to show. English, do you speak it? Like, what is this broken English down here? 10 straps, weight tickets, warehouse to show. So you have to show the warehouse your weight tickets. What's the weight list? 25,000 pounds. Going from Austell, Georgia to New York. So the load is so light that you shouldn't even have to weigh it. So I think they're lying about the load weight. The way they make it sound here is that you have to show up with a scale ticket to get loaded, telling the warehouse how much your truck weighs so that they know how much they can put in the trailer. So they're going to load you up and put every pound they can in there. This is the kind of stuff that beer loads do. I don't know. It's really hard to make out what in the hell they're talking about in here. That is not a good load. But as far as the freight market, making a decision to get into the trucking industry, to change professions or get started in a profession or to open up a business, that's a personal decision. Gather the facts and make whatever decision's best for you. Whenever I became an owner operator, whenever I started my business, it was at a time when everybody said it was absolutely stupid to start a business, to become an owner operator, or to get into trucking. I became an owner operator. Well, I got into trucking right before the lockdown, so I didn't know the lockdowns were going to happen. But I became an owner operator right as the lockdowns ended. And the country was still in turmoil. The economy was still bad. The freight market was still bad. Companies were going out of business like crazy. I became an owner operator. I opened up a business at a time when you couldn't give away a used truck. There were so many used trucks flooding the market from everybody going out of business that whenever I bought my truck, the guy was just like so thrilled that somebody was buying a truck. He said that he almost couldn't give away these trucks. He said that he'd already slashed the price of this truck almost in half. And he still couldn't get anybody to buy it. So he was so thrilled that I was actually buying a truck from him. That's how bad it was, and it worked out really well for me. It ended up being an amazing decision because the freight market turned within a couple of weeks or a month of me becoming an owner-operator. And it went from one of the worst markets ever to one of the best markets ever within months, within like a couple of months. And when I bought my truck was at one of the lowest points of prices for used trucks. It was one of the cheapest times that you could possibly buy a used truck. So it was the absolute perfect time to become an owner-operator. And at that time, everybody told me it was like really, really dumb to become an owner-operator. But it turned out it was the perfect time to become an owner-operator. So I don't know if it's a good time for you to switch jobs or for you to become an owner-operator. That's a personal decision you have to make. Just gather the information and make the decision yourself. Now, what do I think is going to happen? Well, what I'm hoping is going to happen with these tariffs is that manufacturing is going to move back to this country. And if manufacturing moves back to this country, which it will if people think these tariffs are going to last, if people think that these tariffs are going to go away in 6 months or a year, they're not going to move manufacturing back to this country. They're just going to try to find a way to ride it out until the tariffs go back down. But if they are certain that these tariffs are going to last for a long time, then they're going to start moving manufacturing back to this country. And that means that they're going to have to build the facilities. There's going to be a massive amount of construction to build the facilities, which is going to be tons and tons of jobs. And then they're going to need a lot of the labor for those facilities to operate them. It's going to be tons of jobs. And we're going to be importing a lot of raw materials from other countries. We're still going to be importing a lot of stuff. So it's just it could be a massive boon to the economy. But there's going to be this transitional period where things are going to suck and there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty is really, really bad for business. Uncertainty means volatility. Businesses don't like uncertainty, they don't like volatility. So, right now, most businesses are probably sitting around trying to figure out what to do. They're trying to figure out which direction are things going in so they can decide what to do. And then once the businesses pick a direction, and what's mainly going to choose, what I think they're mainly waiting on to pick a direction is, are these tariffs here to stay, or are they a short-term negotiating tactic? What is this, a long-term thing on the tariffs, or is it short-term? That's what they're trying to figure out. Um, so if we have something that helps them to make that decision, then businesses will start reacting. They're going to have to react no matter what. They can't just sit in limbo forever. But we'll just have to wait and see. Like right now, the Trump administration is getting a lot of pressure from countries and from politicians and businesses owners, and just a lot of people are pressuring the government because everybody is focused short term. People are not looking long term. We have been looking short term for many decades in this country. And it's a term that I grew up hearing, kicking the can down the road. We knew when I was a little kid that we had an unsustainable government expense issue. We had an unsustainable Social Security system, an unsustainable Medicare system. The government had promised way more than they could deliver. We've had government accountants from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, the David Walker. I can't remember his full name. You go up, look up David Walker. He used to be the Government Accountability Office. He was the top government accountant. He went on a crusade trying to inform everyone in the early 2000s, and I think he still does it to this day, where he's trying to educate people about fiscal responsibility within our country and how our country is doomed to fail if we don't like show some kind of fiscal restraint and some, fiscal responsibility. We've been kicking this can down the road for decades. It's not going to be fixed in a year. So we can either fix the problem or we can just let the whole thing crumble. We have a fiat currency, a faith-based currency. If we just keep spending money, we can spend as much money as we want. But at some point, the money is going to become worthless. And that's what we're dealing with massive inflation right now. That's one of the big problems with inflation, is just out of control government spending. We went from, like $2 trillion government debt up to like $40 trillion government debt in the course of about a decade. It's insane. Those are numbers that are incomprehensible to the human mind. So we have to get things fixed. Otherwise, our currency is going to become worthless. David Walker, according to, and this is the top government accountant that we used to have. Go watch his 60 Minutes. He did a 60 Minutes episode that did a really good job of outlining it. And I think that based on his numbers, he said that by 2045, our country would be completely bankrupt. Our entire GDP would not be able to pay for like basic government operations. All of the money our government brought in taxes would not be able to pay for basic government operations. And that was a prediction in the early 2000s based on if the government just continued its normal spending at that point and did not take on any extra debt. But the government took on massive amounts of debt past then. So we're on a course right now for our currency to basically become worthless, because we're just going to have to print so much money to pay off all of our debts, to service the interest on our debt, that it's just going to be this like compounding inflation. And that's something that politicians don't like to talk about. All politicians are focused on is short term, just kicking the can down the road. Somebody else will deal with it later. Well, we have an administration right now that said that we're going to deal with it now. And I fully support them. It's going to suck. Decades, for several decades before us, they've been basically living on credit cards. And they've been living beyond their means. And now we're going to try to get everything back in order. Unfortunately, we only have a single term of 4 years. Hopefully the Republicans win the next 2 or 3 major elections, and we have the Republicans in power for like 10 to 15 years. They might maybe be able to right the ship if they have 10 or 15 years. But we're not going to be able to fully fix the problem in one single 4-year term. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how everything goes. But I am optimistic. I look forward to seeing. Let me make sure this thing is still recording audio because my thing fell off. Yeah, it looks like it's still working. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly when or if the manufacturing is going to come back to this country, but that's my big hope for the tariffs, is that we get these manufacturing jobs back in the country. Just to give you an example, Oklahoma City used to have a GM plant, a General Motors plant, that paid really well. And that thing shut down in the late 90s or early 2000s. There's stories like that all across the country of cities having all these manufacturing jobs, and they were really good jobs. Just think about that. Just think about that GM plant in Oklahoma City. I don't know how many people worked there. I would guess that there were probably like 1,000, 1,500 people that worked there. Let's say 1,000 people worked at that GM plant. That was a really good paying job. I think they made like $20 an hour, but this was back in the 90s. That was a really good job back in the 90s to make like $20 an hour for some unskilled labor job. Just think about all of those people that had those. I mean, these are people that don't really have any skill set. These are minimum wage people, but they're making $20 an hour. Think of all that money that they're putting back into that local economy. And you had that story across the entire country of all these manufacturing jobs all over the place. I had an uncle that worked at a Whirlpool factory in Fort Smith, Arkansas in the 80s and 90s. And he made like really good money for some. I'm not sure exactly what he did at the Whirlpool factory. I joke around about he screwed in a light bulb on an assembly line, but I'm not sure exactly what he did. But like he supported his whole family off that job. This is somebody that was unskilled labor, didn't have an education, no skill set. And what happens whenever you take away those manufacturing jobs, these unskilled labor jobs? How do you go and try to sell yourself to a skilled labor job saying, yeah, I screwed in light bulbs in an assembly line for the last 10 years and they shut the plant down, so now I'm here trying to get this job? You have no skill whatsoever. It's not a transferable skill. All those people just went down to basically like minimum wage jobs, or they had to go get trained in some other skill. Just think about how amazing it would be to have those manufacturing jobs come back. All these people that are scraping by right now at minimum wage jobs, and now they're going to have these manufacturing jobs popping up where they have that option available to them. Instead of working at McDonald's, now they can go work at Whirlpool or GM or wherever. And who knows, maybe Apple will stop using slave labor to make their iPhones. Maybe they'll move some manufacturing plants back to the U.S. and you can work in an Apple factory making Apple products. That'd be awesome. But, there's tons and tons of things that I would love to see the manufacturing come back to this country because we are the main market for those products. They're making stuff for us in other countries, because the labor costs and the regulations and everything are so low in those other countries. The tariffs help to offset that imbalance to make it to where it's economically feasible to manufacture in the United States. So I'm hoping we see that manufacturing come back. This year, we could see a lot of construction building up the manufacturing. That would be awesome. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, I'm going to start rambling at this point. So, hope you enjoyed skimming through the load board. The short and sweet of the load board is that the freight market still sucks, but I mean, there's decent loads out there. It could be worse. And the load that I have, that I just booked, $2.99 a mile, going from Dallas to Redding, Terrell, Texas to Redding, California. It's right at 2,000 miles at $3 a mile. So, it pays like $5,740 or something like that. It's like 1,923 miles at $2.99 a mile. But yeah, it's not a great load, but you know, it's good. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to figure out when I'm going to drive to Dallas. Probably drive down there tomorrow, and we'll do some more driving videos. In my driving videos, I'll try to rant and rave about the freight market and all that stuff. In the load board videos, I try to mainly stick to the load board. So I apologize for like the 20-minute freight market rant. But anyway, hope you're having a good one. Bye.